Let's get started with some HTML. In this unit, you're going to learn a little bit of HTML, and you are going to learn how to create it in a file on your machine, either Windows or a Mac, and be able to execute it properly. This should be a very short little video, and then you'll have an assignment that just proves that you can use the tools. The other videos, 5B, 5C, 5D, and so on, are going to get a lot more into the details of HTML. This one is just to get you started. So let's go. So HTML, what is that? It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And it's one of several markup languages, probably the most used. But markup languages take the text of a file, just plain text of a file, and insert some tags around some portion of the text to mark it up and say this is a title, or this is going into a bulleted list, or something like that. HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language, and XML, Extended Markup Language, are some examples of markup languages you may have heard of. HTML is the language of the World Wide Web, so that's what we're going to be using in this unit. Now, tags in HTML are denoted by putting a less than sign and a greater than sign around the name of the tag. These are sometimes called angle brackets. These are not parentheses, it's actually the less than and greater than sign. And they often come in pairs. HTML and /HTML are the start and the ending tag for an HTML file. P and /P are the start and the end of one paragraph of text. Title and /title are the start and the end of whatever text is going to make up a title. Most HTML tags have a start and an end pair that go together, and the ending one has a slash with the same name as the opening one. Not all of them do. For example, /br/ means line break, BR for break. We're going to see an example of using some of these coming up pretty soon. But these items in angle brackets are called tags. Now, an internet browser. Now, you might be using Safari or Chrome or Firefox or Edge or Opera or Internet Explorer. There are quite a few internet browsers. What they do is read HTML pages, interpret their meaning, and display the results. Remember a couple of units ago we talked about fourth generation languages? HTML is a fourth generation language. We put down what we want to see, not how to do that, not how to make a bulleted list or how to put something in certain columns or how to change the color. We just say we want this to be the color red. And the program, either Safari or Chrome or Firefox, reads the HTML and does the work of figuring out, on this machine, how do I type this text? What font should I use? What color should it be? So HTML by itself does nothing unless you have a browser, a web browser, an internet browser that will render the HTML. And browsers might render the HTML in a slightly different fashion. They may use different default font sizes. They might put the title of an HTML page in a different place. But they're all going to be pretty close to the same thing. Now here's the structure of an HTML page, just the skeleton of it. You'll start out with angle bracket and exclamation mark doc type HTML. Then you'll have an HTML and a /HTML. Everything in between here and here is the markup language for your web page. There will be a heading section, head and /head, and a body section, body and /body. And we'll see things that go in between these. Your document should always start with this exclamation doc type space HTML. There are other doc types, but we won't be using them. This one says use the latest version of HTML, which is HTML5. There are other ones that you can use to make sure it interprets it as HTML4 or some other markup language. We, in this course, are always going to use this as the first tag in our file. Then you need to include all of your HTML inside the HTML/HTML tag. You can have a heading area, head/head. We'll see some things that go into the heading area in this lesson and in several of the future lessons. And you should have a body area, body/body. Here's a simple example. Notice I start with doc type HTML, then I have HTML and HTML. I've got head and end head. Inside my header section, I have a title and an end title. And here is just some text. The title of this page, what's going to get displayed as the title on your web browser, is going to be simple HTML example. So this is just the text that I've marked up by putting a title tag around it. In the body, I've got one paragraph of text saying, here's my first paragraph of text. I've got another one that says, here's my second paragraph of text. Notice it doesn't matter if I put the paragraph and end paragraph on the same line, if I put them on new lines. HTML in general is going to ignore white space unless that white space is inside quotes. You may want to indent things like I have to make it easier to understand what's going on, but your browser will read the HTML just fine even if you don't indent. Now, how do you create your HTML? You need to create your HTML as a text file in a text editor, not a word processor. Don't write HTML in Microsoft Word because it's going to put all sorts of formatting commands inside the text. You don't see them, but Microsoft Word puts them in there. They're sort of invisible. You don't want your browser to read that. On a Windows machine, I generally use Notepad. Now, some of the defaults on Notepad are that it will make it a text file and it will always save it with .txt. We don't want that. We want our HTML to end with a file extension of .html. And then you need a save as type of all files, not the default, which is text documents. Now, if you open up Notepad and do a save or a save as, you'll see that there's a drop-down called Save As type that defaults to text documents, and you'll click instead All Files. Then in the file name, you'll end it with .html. On the Mac, I usually use the TextEdit program, which is available in the Applications folder on every Mac machine. You need to set your preferences to plain text, not rich text. Rich text includes formatting stuff like a word processor would. You need to set your preferences to plain text. And when you set your preferences, that only takes effect the next time you open up TextEdit. So you'll want to go in, set your preferences to plain text, close it, then open up again. You need to save your file with a file extension of .html. There are several YouTube videos. Here's a link to one of them for instructions on how to do this. If you just search TextEdit HTML Mac, you'll find lots of YouTube videos that go through it, and I've put a link on the page for this unit for you to see how to do that. I've also done one, put a link in for how to use Notepad for HTML in case you're not real familiar with those programs. Now, validating your HTML is something you can do to check to see if your HTML meets all the rules. Now, you could always just execute your HTML in a browser, and maybe it would work and maybe it wouldn't. But the browsers tend not to give you an error message if something is wrong. They just don't do it. Or in some cases, they'll make an assumption and they'll try and fix your errors. You need to get into a habit of always validating your HTML. And the W3 Consortium, World Wide Web, get it? W3? Who are the people in charge of everything about the World Wide Web, provide a free validator that allows you to check your HTML for proper syntax. If you go to this website, https://validator.w3.org, it lets you either validate the HTML from a file or just copy and paste it into a text box on there, and you press a button that says validate, and it comes back and it says, I found the following errors, I found the following warnings. I want you to do this every time you write HTML. When you submit some to me, I'm going to do it on your code. You don't want me to find the errors. You want to find them so that you can fix them. And it's a good idea to bookmark this page so that you can use it when you're developing your HTML. You'll use it a lot. Now here's your first HTML assignment. The HTML is going to be very simple. It's just to check that you can use the editor, the validator, and the browser correctly. You're going to need to use the doc type, HTML, head, title, body, and p tags correctly. Just like that example we did a couple of pages ago. So you're going to want to go back and look at that example. It's really close to what you need for the first HTML assignment. But what you're going to do is write HTML that displays your name as the title of the page and has 2 paragraphs of text. That's it. The paragraphs can have anything you want in it. You'll have to validate your HTML. You'll execute your HTML, and then you'll take a screenshot of your page in the browser to show that you know how to run your HTML. Then you'll submit both the HTML file and the screenshot to me, and this will be worth just a few points. You should be able to get this done in just a few minutes, and that'll make sure that you know how to go about working on your assignments when we get into more complicated HTML. Now, how do you run your HTML in the browser? On Windows, you might have the default program for HTML files set to your browser. Just double-click on the HTML file in the File Explorer, and it'll go to whatever your default browser is. Now, you might have the default program for .html files set to something else. I've changed it on my machine so that the default program is Notepad, so when I double-click on an HTML file, it lets me edit it and change the HTML. If that's true, then you right-click on the HTML file, select Open With, and choose your browser. On the Mac, you just double-click on the HTML file. It'll open it up in your default browser, which might be Safari, it might be Chrome, whatever you've installed. On either the Windows or the Mac, you could first open up your browser and then type in the full path to your HTML file in the address bar. We normally put something like http:// www.goa.whatever. But you could just put a file name there. And as long as that file name is an HTML file, it will show that page. So several ways to do it. Find one that works for you and go to it.